The grand chamber of the Galactic Concord seemed as though someone had scavenged a thrift store for furniture and slathered everything in reflective alloys to make it look futuristic. Not that anyone would voice such heresy. Seated in their awkwardly levitating chairs were the 27 representatives of the most dominant species in the known galaxy, all attempting to appear dignified while suppressing winces from the discomfort of their impractical seats. Order! Order! Supreme Arbiter Delix Yarn struck his ceremonial gravity rod, sending faint ripples through the artificial gravity field. Several representatives grimaced, regretting their indulgent pre-session feasts. "We convene today," Delix continued, his four ocular appendages twitching with restrained unease, "to discuss the accelerated expansion of the species identified as humans." He pronounced the final word like it left a bitter taste. Envoy Rask of the Ventari Dominion let out a dismissive chitter, his respiration fins flaring. "With all respect, Arbiter, are we truly dedicating an emergency session to these primitive bipeds? They've barely ventured beyond their local stellar cluster." "Barely, you say?" interjected Consul Kren of the Celeste Alliance. Rising from his left chair, his crystalline body caught the ambient light in a dazzling display. The chamber's automated systems obligingly added a dramatic spotlight effect, a luxury Kren had certainly paid extra for. They've established 17 colonies in just 3 decacycles. That's unprecedented. Impressive for such rudimentary beings, purred Advocate Soren of the Silicon Enclave, their holographic forms shimmering with disinterest. But they rely on primitive fusion propulsion and crude quantum signaling. They haven't even developed psionic interfaces. The chamber rippled with laughter. Delegate Vinra of the Hive World Lokthar raised her 2 upper manipulators. Their military capabilities are laughable. They still deploy projectile weaponry. Actual physical projectiles? How quaint. Precisely my concern, Kren said, his crystalline form dimming in frustration. They're achieving extraordinary results with subpar technology. Does that not strike anyone as odd? Delix Yaren's oculars swiveled in different directions, a sure sign of administrative annoyance. "Consul Kren, while the Council appreciates your vigilance, this is bordering on paranoia. Humans are amusing at best, inconsequential at worst. Why? Last session, their emissary mistook our gravity rod for a ceremonial back-scratcher." More laughter erupted, even from the otherwise stoic energy entities of the Nexus Continuum, who pulsed with light and amusement, momentarily causing the hover chairs to jolt. A chorus of startled yelps followed. "Let us not overlook history," Kren pressed on. "Their archives mention something called playing possum. They have a documented tendency to feign weakness before striking with concealed strength." "Oh, come now," Rask retorted, his fins flaring again. "Next you'll claim we should fear their domesticated beasts. What do they call them? Pets? Ludicrous creatures. Yet they insist on taking them everywhere." The chamber howled with laughter. Delix's oculars finally realigned. "I believe it's time to move on to more pressing concerns. For instance, the quality of hoverchair cushioning across the Concord." Kren's crystalline facets darkened in defeat. "You're all making a grave error. Humans have been too silent, too cooperative. They're planning something. I can feel it." Envoy Mylar, a flickering projection, chuckled. "The only thing they're planning is their next pizza party. Did you know they consume flat, circular food items in groups as part of social bonding?" "Primitive." The council moved on, debating trivialities. Kren sank back into his chair, a foreboding sense of doom tightening around him. If only they'd heeded his warnings. His scouts had detected anomalous energy spikes near abandoned human mining zones. They'd noted strangely consistent movements of human merchant ships carrying inexplicable quantities of surplus power cells. But no, the Concord was too busy laughing at pets and pizza parties to realize the peril they faced. 2 weeks after the session, the Concord made what historians would later label the greatest blunder since the Lysian sovereignty attempted to harness supernovae as energy sources. They voted to contain humanity's expansion. The decision was nearly unanimous, 26-1, with only Consul Kren dissenting. The chamber buzzed with self-congratulation, a cacophony that resembled a malfunctioning waste processor. The motion passes, declared Supreme Arbiter Delixiarin, his oculars twisted with delight. The containment fleet will deploy at once to the outer human colonies. Commander Rask, your Dominion forces will have the honor of first contact. We'll have them subdued by nightfall, Rask boasted, his respiration fins flaring with pride. I hear they're serving premium nutrient orbs tonight. The Ventari Dominion fleet descended upon New Ceres, one of humanity's frontier colonies, with all the subtlety of a hyperfreight collision. Their dreadnoughts emerged from hyperspace, weapons primed, expecting to encounter panic and rudimentary defenses. Instead, they found nothing. Sir, a sensor technician stammered. The colony, it's gone. Colonies don't just vanish. Admiral Arik of the Dominion snarled. Scan again. Before they could complete the scan, alarms blared. Energy readings spiked. From the surrounding asteroid belt, ships emerged, sleek, obsidian vessels radiating energy signatures that overloaded Dominion sensors. A transmission cut through their comms. A human officer appeared in the hologram, her expression calm, almost bored. She wore a crisp uniform, and her voice carried the weight of inevitability. You should have left us alone. Admiral Arik's hands clenched into fists, his knuckles creaking with the pressure. His bridge crew, staring at the unsettling energy signatures flashing across their screens, looked like they were seconds away from losing composure. Alert the fleet! Arik barked, voice tight with disbelief. Prepare for immediate defensive maneuvers. This can't be happening. But even as he shouted orders, his mind raced with growing panic. The ships that had emerged from the asteroid belt were not like any human vessel they'd encountered before. Their sleek, dark hulls shimmered like polished obsidian, and their engines pulsed with a power that dwarfed anything the Dominion had seen in the frontier colonies. These ships were designed for war, not exploration. Admiral, we are receiving a transmission, the communications officer reported, her voice barely above a whisper. It's from the human fleet. Put it through, Arik ordered, his tone tight. A holographic image flickered to life before him. It was a human woman, standing at attention in what appeared to be a military uniform, far more formal than any attire they'd seen from humanity's representatives. Her eyes were cold, calculating, as though she had expected this encounter from the very beginning. Admiral Arik, she began, her voice crisp, devoid of fear or surprise. I am Commander Rhiannon of the United Earth Fleet. It seems you've miscalculated. Arik's heart sank. He had never seen a human with such poise, especially not one of their so-called primitives. Miscalculated? Arik spat, his pride igniting. You're out of your depth, Commander. Surrender now, and we may spare your people the consequences of this mistake. Rhiannon's lips curled into the smallest of smiles, one that made Arik's blood run cold. I don't think you understand, she said. You've come to the wrong colony, and you've come at the wrong time. The hologram flickered, and before Arik could respond, the transmission cut out. His crew looked at him in stunned silence, all aware that something had just shifted, but no one dared speak the thoughts running through their minds. The sensors officer, now pale and shaking, looked at the Admiral with wide eyes. Sir, the fleet's energy levels have spiked. It's impossible, but their ships are charging weapons. Prepare to engage, Arik barked, though his stomach twisted with unease. All ships on full alert. Bring up shields and ready the cannons. But just as he issued the order, something even more shocking occurred. The asteroid belt around New Ceres, which had seemed silent and lifeless just moments ago, suddenly came alive. The surrounding rocks and debris shifted, revealing hundreds, no, thousands, of hidden ships. More than any fleet could have possibly accounted for, all bearing the same dark, imposing design. Arik's eyes widened in horror. The humans hadn't just been hiding their strength. They'd been concealing an entire fleet. By the gods! How did they? He whispered, stunned. The human forces they had so casually dismissed were not only capable of space warfare, but had orchestrated the greatest deception the galaxy had ever seen. The commander's voice crackled through the comms once more, but this time, her tone was different. There was no mockery, no humor, just a chilling calmness. Admiral, I strongly suggest you leave. Now. The fleet commander's blood ran cold. A single wave of Rhiannon's hand, a gesture so casual it might have been brushing away a fly, and the entire human fleet powered up their weapons. Brilliant energy beams shot across space, lighting up the dark expanse like the flash of distant stars. "Shields up!" Arik screamed as the Dominion fleet attempted to maneuver. But it was too late. The first blast struck one of the lead ships, and it disintegrated in an instant. A second beam followed, tearing through the hull of another warship, sending debris flying into space. "We're under attack," screamed the sensor officer. "We can't block the energy. It's—" The ship's communication system buzzed with a loud crackle before Rhiannon's voice rang out again, colder than ever. "This is the last warning. Turn around, or you will be wiped out." One ship at a time, Arik's mind raced. He had miscalculated. The Council had underestimated these humans, and now he was the one paying the price. We can't hold out much longer, sir," cried the weapons officer. "Their firepower is off the charts. We need to retreat." A retreat? Arik's pride screamed against it, but reality crushed his defiance. His fleet was no match for these humans. Not now. Not with these terrifying new ships and their advanced technology. "Order a retreat," he growled through gritted teeth. "Tell the fleet to disengage and—" But before he could finish, a new transmission cut through his comms. This time, it wasn't Rhiannon's voice. It was a deep, rumbling tone, almost mechanical in nature, that reverberated through the room. "We are the forgotten fleet of Earth," it boomed, "and you have made the gravest of mistakes." With that, the holographic image of a massive, colossal warship appeared on screen. A ship so large, so heavily armed, it seemed to dwarf the entire Dominion fleet. It was surrounded by hundreds of smaller vessels, all gleaming black and radiating overwhelming power. The Forgotten Fleet, the ancient warships of humanity that had long been considered lost, scattered, or nothing more than myths. And now they were here. A new chill gripped the Admiral. The humans had not only been biding their time, they had been preparing for this moment. Their primitives had been playing a long game, one that none of the galaxy's finest minds had anticipated. As the first volley of energy blasts hit, Arik could do nothing but watch in horror. The Dominion fleet was no longer just facing a handful of human ships. They were facing a force that had been hidden away for centuries. The forgotten fleet of Earth had returned, and with it, a wrath none of them could survive. "Prepare for impact," Arik shouted in a final, desperate attempt to salvage control. But in his heart, he knew the battle was already lost. The forgotten fleet had risen from the shadows, and the galaxy was about to learn the true cost of underestimating humanity. Admiral Arik stood frozen on the bridge of his flagship, staring at the images of his fleet being systematically obliterated by the human warships. His mind refused to accept the reality unfolding before him. His entire fleet, once the pride of the Ventari Dominion, was being torn apart by a force he had dismissed as nothing more than a nuisance. Now, humanity had revealed its true strength. The so-called primitive species was not so primitive after all. "Admiral," the voice of his tactical officer pierced the silence, frantic and trembling. "We've lost communications with half the fleet. Our shields are failing. If we don't retreat now, we'll be destroyed." Arik didn't respond immediately. The sight of his ships being reduced to fragments in real time was too much to process. The human fleet, led by the enormous flagship, Aegis of the Forgotten, was a behemoth. Its weapons unleashed torrents of energy, so powerful that even the best shield technology in the galaxy could barely hold up. "We can't afford to lose any more ships," the tactical officer continued, practically pleading. "We need to—" "I know." Arik snapped, his voice strained. He turned his gaze to the view screen, where the last remnants of his fleet struggled to avoid the relentless barrage. His hands trembled, a mix of anger and fear tightening his chest. But it wasn't just fear of losing this battle. It was fear of what would happen when the Council found out. The humans were playing a long game, and they were winning. "We're not retreating," Arik declared, his voice barely audible, but with a quiet determination. "We're gonna fight. We can't show weakness." "But, Admiral," the officer argued, "our ships are being torn apart. The Obsidian Fong has already been destroyed, and the Azure Dawn." "I said we fight." Arik roared, his fury igniting. His hands gripped the armrests of his command chair so tightly that his fingers dug into the cold metal. "Prepare to launch counterstrikes with whatever we have left. Target their flagship. If we can destroy the Aegis, the rest of their fleet will fall." His officers hesitated, looking between each other, unsure of how to proceed. The Aegis was not just another ship, it was a symbol of the human military might. Every sensor on their ships was blaring with alarming readings. The power output from that vessel alone was staggering, far exceeding anything they had encountered. Before anyone could respond, the communications console crackled to life. The human commander, Rhiannon, appeared again, her expression unreadable. "Admiral Arik," she said, her voice calm and measured, "this is your last warning. Stand down and leave this system immediately. We will not hesitate to eliminate every last one of you." Her words were punctuated by the appearance of a massive hologram of the Aegis of the Forgotten. Its dark hull gleamed, a weapon of mass destruction capable of wiping out entire fleets with a single strike. Arik's heart pounded in his chest. This was no mere trick. These humans had been waiting for this moment, and now they had the upper hand. "You're making a mistake," Arik spat back, the pride of his people forcing him to speak despite the looming defeat. "You can't win. The entire galaxy will come for you." Rhiannon's gaze seemed to pierce him through the hologram. "The galaxy," she said softly, "has already been warned. But it seems your council chose to ignore us. You've already made your move. Now we make ours." Before Arik could retort, the hologram disappeared. Almost immediately, the censor's officer screamed in alarm. "Admiral, the Aegis is powering up its main weapon." The bridge fell into a sudden, horrified silence. The human flagship was about to fire. The Dominion ships scattered in every direction, attempting to avoid the energy blast that would surely annihilate them. But it was too late. The first shot from the Aegis hit the Dread Sovereign, the Dominion's second-largest ship. The blast was so powerful that the ship was vaporized in an instant, leaving nothing but a cloud of debris and ionized gas where it had been moments before. "Get us out of here!" Arik shouted, finally realizing the true scale of the disaster unfolding. "Full-speed retreat. Now!" But it was clear that retreat was no longer an option. The Aegis unleashed another wave of energy, and this time it struck multiple ships at once, tearing them apart like paper. The Dominion fleet had no chance against this new force. These humans, these so-called primitives, were no longer the joke they had been in the Council's chambers. On the bridge, there was nothing left to do but watch as the fleet crumbled under the onslaught. Arik's mind raced, but there was no way to salvage this. The humans had not only shown they could fight, they had shown they could obliterate entire fleets without breaking a sweat. Then, as if to punctuate the finality of their victory, the Aegis deployed its fleet in a perfect formation. The darkness of space was now filled with hundreds of human ships, sleek, fast, and deadly. They moved like a storm, closing in on the remnants of the Dominion fleet. Arik knew that no one was going to survive this. The Aegis and its armada were simply too powerful, too prepared. And as the realization set in, a dreadful thought crept into his mind. This wasn't just a battle. This was a message that humanity was no longer the weak, scattered species they had once believed them to be. No, humanity had been waiting for this moment, and now they were taking their place as the dominant force in the galaxy. Arik, eyes wide with disbelief, whispered to himself, "We've unleashed something we can't stop." Commander Rhiannon watched the destruction unfold on her tactical display. The Dominion fleet, once an imposing force, was now little more than a broken shell of its former self. Her fingers hovered over the controls, but there was no need to issue further commands. Her fleet had done its job. "Commander," came the voice of her second-in-command, Lieutenant Tarek, "the Dominion is finished." "What now?" Rhiannon's expression remained impassive as she observed the final moments of the enemy fleet. Now, she said, we wait. Wait. Yes, Rhiannon replied, her voice cold but resolute. We wait for the rest of the galaxy to realize their mistake. Humanity has been underestimated for too long. But now, they'll understand that we are no longer the hunted. We are the hunters. Her gaze hardened, her fingers finally pressing a single button. A transmission was sent, wide-reaching, across the galaxy. The Forgotten Fleet has returned, she announced, her voice echoing with quiet triumph. And we are reclaiming what is ours. The galaxy was stunned into silence. For decades, the Council had held sway over the most powerful species, dictating terms of peace, war, and trade. But now, humanity had shattered that carefully constructed order in a matter of days. The Aegis of the Forgotten and its fleet had decimated the Dominion's strongest military force without breaking a sweat. News of the battle at New Ceres spread like wildfire, sparking confusion, fear, and in some corners, an eager sense of vindication. On the orbital station of the Galactic Council, the usual hum of diplomatic chatter had turned to uneasy whispers. Representatives from the Council's 27 species gathered in their private chambers, their faces grave, their thoughts clouded with uncertainty. Vox Nix, the Supreme Chancellor, sat at the head of the meeting table, his many eyes flickering nervously as the assembled diplomats shifted uncomfortably in their hover chairs. I'll say it once more, Vox Nix began, his voice thin and strained. The Dominion has been decimated. He paused, as if testing the weight of the words. We've never seen anything like this. That fleet humanity has kept hidden all this time. Ambassador Cora of the Hearthen Syndicate, her pale green skin almost glowing in the dim chamber light, spoke up, her voice low but filled with contempt. You were all so certain that the humans were a passing threat. They were nothing, until now. You'll pardon my skepticism, Cora, Ambassador Grillith of the Rymos Collective said, his aquatic form shimmering with irritation. But I still find it difficult to believe that they could organize such a fleet without outside influence. There must be some sort of... Do not make excuses for them. Cora snapped, her tentacles twitching with annoyance. They have outsmarted all of us. They have known what we refuse to accept. She glanced around the room, her voice lowering. The Council's underestimation of them is what led to this. A low murmur rippled through the room as the representatives exchanged uneasy glances. Every species had dismissed humanity as weak or unpredictable, and it was true that the human colonies, though growing rapidly, had never been seen as a serious threat. Most had ignored them, considering the vastness of the galaxy and the power wielded by the dominant species. But now, the Aegis and its fleet were a stark reminder that human potential had been sorely underestimated. That was the reality they faced now, a reality that few were prepared for. The question then, Ambassador Leon of the Niral Federation said, her voice calm and measured as she adjusted her seat, is not whether humanity can destroy us, it's whether we can stop them. And if we can't, how much longer can we pretend the status quo will hold? You think they're going to stop at the Dominion? Vox Nix asked, his voice a low, trembling growl. Do you think they'll be content with the destruction of a single species? He looked up, his multiple eyes locking with each of the representatives. We've seen the reports. The human fleet isn't just large, it's vast. Their ships are everywhere. If they intend to reclaim what's theirs, there's no stopping them. Ambassador Cora let out a heavy sigh. What matters is not whether they will stop, it's whether we can stop them. She paused for a moment, considering her words carefully. We can no longer pretend that they're weak. If we let them, they'll take everything. And what do you propose? Vox Nix asked, his tone sharp with frustration. Cora looked directly at the Supreme Chancellor. It's simple, we fight. The entire Council needs to unite. We send an armada, every fleet we can muster, and we take humanity out now, before they have a chance to organize fully. We've seen what they can do with a fraction of their power. Imagine what would happen if they were allowed to expand. No, Leon said firmly. We do not fight humanity. Not yet. Not without understanding more about their capabilities and motives. What if we're wrong? What if they are simply defending their homeworld and their colonies? We don't know enough. If we rush into a confrontation without knowing their intentions, we risk starting a war we cannot win. Leon's right, added Ambassador Zet from the Myrtle Union, his crystalline body reflecting the flickering lights of the chamber. We need more intelligence. We need to understand how humanity was able to conceal a fleet of that magnitude. How did they hide it from us for so long? This fleet doesn't just show their military strength. It shows they've been planning for something like this for a very long time. You can't be serious. Grillith's voice cut through the room, his gills flaring in agitation. You think they're waiting for a chance to strike peacefully? These humans are nothing like the rest of us. Their records, their history, they've been in conflict from the moment they left their planet. I don't think it's as simple as you're making it, Cora countered, her voice slow and deliberate. We've underestimated them in the past, and now we've seen what they're capable of. But that doesn't mean we have all the answers. We've had decades, centuries of information, and we ignored the signs. Her eyes scanned the room. Her tone hardened. Now we're at a crossroads. A long, tense silence followed. The representatives of the Galactic Council exchanged nervous glances, knowing that this moment would define the future of the galaxy. No one had answers, not truly, but something had to be done. You want to wait? Vox Nix asked, his voice quivering now. Then what? How long do we wait while they build more fleets? While they strengthen their forces? Leon shifted in her chair. We need to open diplomatic channels. Talk to them. No war? Not yet. Not until we fully understand why they're doing this. We may be at a turning point, but we have to be sure. Cora shook her head. They've shown us nothing but force. They won't negotiate. If we don't strike now, we're already too late. Vox Nix was silent, his many eyes flicking back and forth as he processed the arguments. Finally, he spoke, his voice filled with a deep weariness. We must not allow humanity to control the future. But we also must avoid a war that would destroy us all. If there's even the smallest chance that they may be open to diplomacy, we must explore it. The Supreme Chancellor paused for a moment before he spoke again, his voice heavy with the weight of the decision. I will contact Commander Rhiannon. Let's see if we can find a way to negotiate before we destroy each other. But even as he said the words, deep down, he knew that the Council's greatest mistake wasn't underestimating humanity. It was failing to realize that humanity's fleet was only the beginning. And now, as the galaxy stood at the precipice of a new era, no one knew what would come next. The Galactic Council summit was in full swing, but there was no festive air in the room this time. Representatives from dozens of species sat in their hovering chairs, their faces drawn tight with anxiety. The usual banter had been replaced by tense silence, as they waited for the outcome of Vox Nix's message to Commander Rhiannon of the human fleet. Every species, from the towering Arcturians to the liquid-based Rhinox, knew that the fate of the galaxy hung in the balance. Vox Nix's many eyes blinked rapidly as he stared at the projection of the human commander. The holographic image flickered slightly before solidifying into Rhiannon's sharp features, her uniform crisp and commanding. Her eyes, a deep shade of amber, regarded the assembled council with an almost eerie calmness. Supreme Chancellor Vox Nix, she said, her voice smooth but laced with an undeniable edge. I understand you have requested this meeting, though I must admit, I find it curious that you would choose diplomacy after your recent actions. Commander Rhiannon, Vox Nix replied, his voice shaky despite his attempt at authority. We must find a way to avoid unnecessary conflict. The galaxy has had enough of war. Your fleet, he swallowed, the weight of his words heavy, is a force unlike anything we have ever seen. We fear that if you continue your expansion, it will lead to a galaxy-wide war that will decimate countless species. Rhiannon's eyes narrowed slightly, but her posture remained relaxed. You're worried about war? You should have been worried when you chose to ignore us, Chancellor. We have expanded because we needed to. We built a fleet because you pushed us into a corner. The tension in the chamber deepened as the council members exchanged uncertain glances. The implications of Rhiannon's words were clear. Humanity was not just defending itself, but planning something far grander, something none of them had anticipated. "You have misunderstood us," Vox Nix continued, though it was clear he was grasping at straws. "We have no intention of provoking you. We simply want peace. Let us work together to avoid a devastating conflict." He paused, searching Rhiannon's face for any sign of weakness. "We propose a treaty, a mutual agreement that will ensure the safety of all species." Rhiannon's expression shifted, and her lips curled into a faint smile. "A treaty? After you've already shown your true hand by sending a fleet to destroy us? After you failed to recognize us as a legitimate power? No, Chancellor, it's too late for treaties." The room fell silent. The council members were starting to realize what Rhiannon had already known. The time for diplomacy had passed. Humanity had grown too strong, too confident, and now they were not interested in playing by anyone's rules but their own. "We did not seek this war," Rhiannon continued, her voice colder now, "but we will not hesitate to finish it." The transmission abruptly cut out, leaving Vox Nix staring at an empty screen. A heavy silence hung in the air for a long moment before the Supreme Chancellor slumped in his chair, his multi-eyed gaze filled with dread. He had tried, with all his might, to avoid this outcome. But now, it seemed there was no stopping the storm humanity had unleashed. "You've done it now," Cora, the Hearthen Syndicate ambassador, said quietly, her voice almost a whisper. "You've all been too slow to act, too blind to see the inevitable. But we can still fight back," Grillith from the Rymos Collective interjected, his tone suddenly frantic. "We have fleets. We can unite the galaxy against this invasion." "You don't understand," Leon of the Niral Federation countered, her voice calm, though filled with resignation. "We are too divided. Humanity has already shown us that their strength is far beyond anything we imagined. Even if we unite our forces, we may be facing an enemy we cannot defeat." The room descended into chaos as ambassadors argued with each other, some calling for immediate retaliation, others for a plea to the human fleet, but none of them daring to speak out loud the one thought that was on everyone's mind. They had underestimated humanity, and now it might be too late to stop them. 2 weeks later, a broadcast from the Aegis of the Forgotten flickered across the galaxy. The message was short, direct, and inescapable. "This is Commander Rhiannon of the United Human Fleet." Her voice echoed across the stars, cold and unyielding. "To the Galactic Council, we offer you this choice: surrender or face annihilation. Humanity will no longer be ignored. We are reclaiming what was once ours. Consider this your final warning." The screen went black, and then a hologram of the Aegis appeared, casting its immense shadow over the galaxy. The once proud fleets of the Council, factions that had dominated galactic politics for eons, now cowered beneath the shadow of the human fleet. And in every corner of the galaxy, species who had once looked down on humanity now realized the truth. The Forgotten Fleet was no longer forgotten. It was the dominant force in the galaxy. The Council never responded. The human fleet did not need to wait for an answer. With devastating precision, Rhiannon's forces struck key Council-controlled worlds. The battle for supremacy was brutal and swift. Entire civilizations were wiped out in the blink of an eye, while others bent the knee, unwilling to face the inevitable destruction humanity promised. One by one, the Council's former members surrendered, offering feeble gestures of submission. But Rhiannon and her fleet were not interested in empty gestures. They wanted one thing: total control. Within a year, the last remnants of the Galactic Council had been dismantled. The species that had once ruled the galaxy, the self-proclaimed masters of the cosmos, were now under humanity's heel. Those who resisted found their planets turned to ash, their people scattered across the stars. Supreme Chancellor Vox Nix, the once proud leader of the Galactic Council, was found hiding in a forgotten corner of space, begging for mercy. The humans did not offer it. His empire was no more, and thus the galaxy was reshaped. Humanity's forgotten fleet, once thought lost to history, had reclaimed its birthright. With Rhiannon at the helm, they forged a new order, one where no species would be allowed to forget humanity's strength, its resolve, and its place at the top of the galactic hierarchy. In the end, The Council's greatest mistake was not just underestimating humanity. It was assuming that their dominance would last forever. Now, there was a new power in the galaxy, and it was human, and they would never be forgotten again.